Hello, I'm Daphne Goode on an absolutely gorgeous Vancouver Island day. And while the logging trucks are thundering past us here in Lake Cowichan, behind us at the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives, logging history is being preserved. We're going to take a glimpse of that. We're also going to be sharing some mining history with you and social history. And we are welcoming you to Go Island, Cowichan Valley. On today's show, a love of woodworking turns into a business. What's up in the BC legislature? And we'll take you back in time with social history and logging artifacts in Lake Cowichan. All that and more on Go Island, Cowichan Valley.
Go Island is brought to you by German Auto Import Network.
We are here at Kaatza Station Museum and Archives with Barbara Simkins. Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Well, I've already learned a lot. There is just a wealth of history and amazing photographs inside. We've learned that the best in Canada mill was the mill at Yubo in 1929, and I'm sure that's just one of many highlights. Tell us about some.
It is. In 1929, that was the only mill in the area, but they started logging here actually in the late 1800s, and they started with river drives to get the logs because there was no rail line. So to get the logs to Duncan, Cowichan Bay, they had to take them down on the river, and that was not successful. And so eventually we got this, the Esquimalt and Nanaimo rail line came in, and so that allowed the trains to come, and then that's when the mill really got going in Yubo. And then there was a mill in Missachi Lake, Hillcrest, and then there was a mill at WFI in Honeymoon Bay.
Well, you've done a great job of capturing it all here, and it goes far beyond photographs. There are all kinds of implements and artifacts and pieces of tools and machinery that really brings it alive.
Yes, it does. Luckily, when we first opened in 1983, we were able to get the drag saw and a different logging equipment, and we have that on display behind the mural, and other things like that that are outside right now, the larger equipment.
It's astonishing to me. There are actually 3 buildings here on site, and we're going to give you just a glimpse of each one of them. But inside here, we have the post office and the general store. We've got quite an array of domestic kitchen utensils, which are just a riot to look at. I think a lot of people will appreciate that exhibit.
Yes, because the social life was very important, and most of the loggers had families, wives and kids, and so there was a lot of things like that going on, and so we have a store and a post office. There was 2 general stores in town, Scully Brothers and then Gordon's store, and they were just the hub of the community, as was the post office.
Barbara, this is still a small town, and it would appear to me that people are very close to their history. Do you get a lot of donations?
Everything in this building is from donations from this area. People have lived here for generations. And so they kept things, I guess, because they didn't move around a lot. So we were able to get all those things, and not just the artifacts, but also the photographs.
Really, that's amazing that people have the material in such good condition.
Yes, we've been very lucky. I guess they saved it in their garages and their attics, and and when we first opened, we just put a call out that this is what we're going to do, and we got all these things, and then over the years, we just keep getting more and more.
Right. Now we're going to look at an old Underwood typewriter that is just hilarious. It's hard to believe how far we've come now with all our word processing, but it's wonderful to look back in time because so many curators have said we learn a lot about ourselves now and even looking toward the future by reflecting on our past. How so?
That's very true. We get young kids in here, 10 and under, who don't know about typewriters and all that sort of thing. And I just think it's very important that this community has such a wonderful, rich history in logging and many other things. And we need to know that now to understand how we got here.
Now, you have a lot of volunteers who are just as interested in history as you are, Barbara, and I just want to touch on that briefly because sometimes I think museums probably attract the people who are of that same era, that's being reflected, but in fact you have all kinds of different age volunteers.
Yes, I think our youngest volunteer is 23. And he just comes and he helps on Thursdays when the guys come and they do maintenance around, and that's what he likes to do. And then up to the early 80s, I think, is our oldest volunteer, and she works in the archives, and she just helps with the newspapers and finding information for us.
How would you describe a volunteer that is here? Someone I'm sure, who's extremely curious about history.
Yeah, they're curious about history and they're passionate about their community. That's the biggest thing, is they're passionate about Cowichan Lake area.
So tell us, we're going to move on to two other buildings. There's a lot of history from just on site from those buildings. Can you give us a bit of a preview of where the buildings came from?
Sure. The what we now call the Bell Tower School was a small school. Started out as a single bell tower school, one room, and grew into two rooms. And it was down by the river, and it got moved here in 1986. And then we refurbished it several years later as we got money. And then we got another building, which originally was the Massachi Lake School. And when Massachi Lake closed down in 1968, the school went to the high school, and it was used there as a shop and a band room and an art room, I think. And then they were going to tear it down because it was getting in bad shape. And we got 1/3 of it, and the other 2/3 went other places. And then over the years, we have refurbished that one too.
To research Lake Cowichan topics, the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives is a great resource. Volunteers are also welcome. For information, visit the website kaatzamuseum.ca or call 250-749-6142. To visit the museum, head to 125 South Shore Road in Lake Cowichan. It's located right beside the river and park in the heart of town. More to come on our tour. Thanks, Barbara. Our tour of the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives, we're going to continue that. First, we'll take a break, and we'll also be featuring a story with Paul Beilstein. He's going to introduce us to a Cowichan Valley woodworker who is kind of carving out a retirement fund at the same time. He's building furniture for people all over the world. That's coming up after the break. Thanks for that story, Paul Beilstein. Well, there are so many creative people here in the Cowichan Valley, and Gordon's story especially is really inspiring. Well, here we are at the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives having a wonderful tour today, and we're going to head into the Bell Tower School right behind me.
The Bell Tower School is actually, it never had a name when it was in its original place by the Cowichan River, and it was just called the Bridge School. Because it was one of the only schools in town. And then when it got moved here, when we had the campaign to have it moved, they started calling it the Bell Tower School. So that's how it got its name. And we've got a small classroom display, and then in the room next door is archive storage. And thanks to the steelworkers, 1937 local, we have quite a large collection of the Wilmer Gold photos, which you'll be seeing. And then we have a meeting room, which is used for events. We hold Heritage Days here and quite a few other things throughout the year.
Well, it's almost scary looking around this classroom. I don't think I'm this old, but I actually remember those lunch kits.
I know, I get that from a lot of visitors. It upsets them a lot when they see things like that, yes.
Yes, to think that our character is part of the museum. Yikes! But it is fascinating, and it's great to see how well preserved the books are and the desks, and there must be people reliving their childhood whenever they come through. I did when I looked at the photos as well.
Yes, I find looking at the photos of the year that you actually went to school, it sort of looks like no matter where you went to school, it looks the same. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the books are great. Unfortunately, a number of schools have closed here in this community over the years, and so we've gotten a lot of their books. So we have a lot of the old Dick and Jane books and things that we all learned to read on. Yeah.
And Maclean's method of writing, I
Yes,
always
that's
remember
another
that
one.
as well. That's a part of history. Well, we're going to move on to the photo gallery next. Barbara, obviously Wilmer Gold was an amazingly talented photographer, and this collection looks extensive.
Yes, it is. Wilmer Gold came here in, I think, 1932 as a photographer, and he would go out into the woods and gather the men together and shoot them and then charge them each like $5 or something for the photo, and that's how he made his living. But by doing that, he chronicled all the history of logging in this community, and it wasn't just the Cowichan Valley, it was all up and down the island and even some in the interior of the rest of BC. And he was just, luckily for us, he was just an amazing photographer and captured it so well.
Well, if people come here to the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives, you can view all of this wonderful collection and a lot more. We're just showing off a little bit today. There's extensive amount on display, and you still need more room.
Yes, constantly we need more room. This IWA collection that we received from the steelworkers, 1937 local, has 2,000 negatives and I'm up to over almost 6,000 photographs, and then about 3 filing cabinets full of documents. And so we're yes.
It's a good thing you love history and you love curating, Barbara. I was looking at some of these photographs. They're just such amazing expressions on the faces of the men who worked all over the island and specifically in this area. But there's also some great shots of the kitchen staff. And of course, that's key for guys who are out in the woods working hard.
Yes, the head cook was almost always the highest paid, and if he didn't cook you a good meal, he was gone. So the cookhouse was the place to work, and one of the most important, for sure. And I love looking at their old faces, well, the young faces then, and how hard they worked, and no hard hats. No real equipment. We have pictures of logging trucks with no protection behind. So if something happened and the truck stopped, suddenly the logs would come and hit them in the back of the head. Right. There were so many accidents and deaths. It was just awful. So thank heavens for the unions coming in and solving that problem over the years.
Yeah, this is amazing working history. There's some beautiful scenics as well, so you'll have to come down and enjoy it for yourself. Now we're moving on to Missachi Lake School, which I understand was not a school for very long.
No, it wasn't. Hillcrest opened in 1943. They moved here from the Satlam area, but they didn't have a school. We're assuming that the kids just came into Lake Cowichan to go to school. And the school was built sometime in the mid-50s. I think around 1956 is when it opened. And then the mill closed in 1968, so the school closed. And then that school was moved to Lake Cowichan at the high school, and they used it as an art room, a band room, and other things. And then when they were going to tear it down, the community got upset, of course, and because it's a historic building. And so we got 1/3 of it. And now we're using it as a storage area, display area, and then the workroom for our volunteers.
To research Lake Cowichan topics, the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives is a great resource. Volunteers are also welcome. For information, visit the website kaatzamuseum.ca or call 250-749-6142. To visit the museum, head to 125 South Shore Road in Lake Cowichan. It's located right beside the river and park in the heart of town. And there's some really, really interesting pieces of equipment coming up. So stay with us. We'll be taking that part of the tour when we come back after a break. And as well, we'll tell you about what's going on in the BC legislature with our political reporter, Sean Leslie. Coming up, stay with us. We're coming back after the break. We are here at the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives, where history definitely comes to life. Of course, we're looking at logging history, but a lot more as well, and I'm with Barbara Simkins. So behind us, we see all kinds of tools and things related more to the rail line, correct?
Yes. In this building, the Missachi Lake building, we collect logging equipment and also the rail line and a lot of mining equipment, too, because there was a lot of mining in the area.
So people also work in this tool shop area, and I guess these would be people who are really connected maybe at one time to the railway or the logging industry, Barbara?
Well, most of our volunteers were in the logging industry in some way, and there are volunteers. And then a number of years ago, we set up this building, and we needed to have a shop so they could work safely and dry, because most of the time they were outside before that, and so that was inconvenient to say the least. So they work in here, and then they also wanted part of it to be a storage display area. So we've set it up more as storage, but people do like coming through and looking at some of the different artifacts.
Oh yeah, it looks like a great hobby room as well, though I can just imagine it's inspiring for a lot of the older guys maybe that used to work in the industry. And we're beside the photography wagon of Wilmer Gold, the photos we were looking at earlier. He was not a shy businessman, was he?
No, he wasn't. Because he went out and took the photos, he had to sell them. And then also in his later years, he wrote a book, and he just used to walk around from door to door and sort of demand that you buy his book. Yeah. And so we've all got his book, which is excellent, by the way, and not for sale anymore, unfortunately. But the wagon we found on his property in very bad shape. Wow. And thanks to several of our wonderful volunteers, they've restored it. We did some research, and we think it originally came from Victoria and was for one of the small grocery stores, and it was horse-drawn in the early days. And then he used to pull it with his little vehicle that he had, sort of like what we'd call now a station wagon.
Yeah. Well, speaking of restoration, I see some volunteers must have worked really hard because there's an old wringer washer which looks pretty darn good now.
It does look really good now, but it was just an old rust bucket when we got it. And another one of our volunteers took it home and figured out how to take it apart and then put it back together, using the internet also to find other ones that were already restored. And now we have it in here for display.
That's awesome. So speaking of volunteering, I know you can always do with more volunteers. What are the various jobs and duties volunteers have here?
We have a lot of volunteers in the archives, and they help with a variety of things, from filing to looking up information in newspapers and using photographs and things. And then the volunteers that come in on Thursday all work with maintenance, and they take care of the buildings. Anything, even if the light bulbs need changing, they do that sort of thing. And there's a lot of light bulbs in our building. And then they fix old machinery and help to get displays ready and climb ladders, and they do all kinds of things.
Wow.
And then I have other volunteers that just come and sit and sort of babysit the museum when I'm not here and greet the visitors.
Yeah, and it's a great place to be. You can learn so much about the Cowichan Valley area, the history of logging, and so much about the social history as well. And looking again at Wilmer Gould's photography van here and the great job the volunteers have done, I see that he was born in Victoria in 1893, and he lived to be almost 100 years old.
Very close, yes.
And you were saying, Barbara, he was really beyond talented, because we've already seen some of his work, but he did some work for some very top branded magazines.
Yes, he worked for Time Magazine, sending them his photographs, and National Geographic, and Life or Look, or both. I can't remember which exactly. Yeah,
I bet a lot of people on Vancouver Island know his name.
I'm sure they do, because most of them have his photographs.
Now, the museum is open Monday to Friday, but on good days when you have a summer student or you have a volunteer that will work weekends, then you're open on Sundays starting pretty soon?
Starting this weekend, on April the 6th, we're open on Sundays from 11 to 3 is when the volunteers are going to come in. And then once we get a summer student, could happen probably the end of May, maybe the middle of June, then we're open 7 days a week from 10 until 4.
What a lot of fun. It's a great way to spend some time and learn something about your own history coming here to the Kaatza Station Museum and Archives, and a beautiful area right by the park, right by the river. Not a bad place to work.
It's not. I have a great view. Yep.
Well, thanks so much for your time today,
Thank you,
Barbara. It's
Daphne.
been great to visit with you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And don't forget, we love your story ideas. And that's how we found out about the museum here, is because Barbara had told us about what they're doing. So remember, in your neighborhood, if there's somebody of interest or there's a development going on, something happening in the social world, we'd love to tell your story. Just get a hold of us. We're on Facebook and Twitter. You can email us, or if you see us around, just be sure and stop us. Let us know about your ideas. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Go Island is brought to you by German Auto Import Network. Women's clothing provided by Tulip Noir. Casual designer fashions. Men's wardrobe by DG Bremner & Co. Menswear and accessories. Hair services provided by Salon J.